In just 28 seconds, one of Hollywood's biggest stars would unleash a verbal assault that would leave Stephen Colbert speechless and the Late Show audience in stunned silence. What started as pointed questions about Mark Wahlberg's controversial past would spiral into a career-threatening meltdown that exposed the host's true character and sent shockwaves through late-night television. The tension was palpable from the moment Wahlberg walked onto the Ed Sullivan Theater stage last night. Unlike his usual energetic entrance, the Boston native moved with calculated precision, his jaw set in a way that suggested he came prepared for battle. Colbert, smug behind his desk with that trademark smirk, had no idea he was about to face the fight of his career. "Mark Wahlberg, everybody," Colbert announced to thunderous applause, but even the audience seemed to sense something was off. Wahlberg's handshake was brief, his smile forced, and as he settled into the guest chair, his posture screamed defiance, rather than the usual promotional charm guests bring to late-night shows. "So, Mark, let's talk about your new film," Colbert began, shuffling through his cards with theatrical flair. "But first, I have to ask, and I know this might be uncomfortable, but there's been renewed discussion online about some incidents from your youth. How do you reconcile your past with your current image as a family man and role model?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Wahlberg's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the only sound in the theater was the hum of the cameras rolling. This wasn't the softball question about his latest action movie that his publicist had pre-approved. This was an ambush, and everyone in the room knew it. "Stephen," Wahlberg said slowly, his Boston accent thickening with each word, "I thought we were here to talk about my film. You know, the reason your producers booked me on this show." Colbert leaned back in his chair, that infuriating grin spreading wider across his face. "Oh, we'll get to that. But our audience deserves to know who they're really watching. Don't you think? I mean, when someone has a history of—" "Stop right there," Wahlberg interrupted, his voice cutting through Colbert's condescending tone like a blade. "You want to play this game? Let's play. But let's talk about your history too, Stephen. Let's talk about how you've made a career out of attacking people who can't fight back." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to seeing on late-night television. This felt real, dangerous, and completely unscripted. Colbert's smile faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure, but Wahlberg had already seen the crack in his armor. "I'm not sure what you mean by that," Colbert replied, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered." "Bullshit," Wahlberg shot back, and the word echoed through the theater like a gunshot. "You're asking loaded questions designed to embarrass me on national television. You think because you're behind that desk you're untouchable? You think you can just tear people down for your ratings?" The camera operator scrambled to capture every angle of the confrontation. In the control room, producers were frantically debating whether to cut to commercial, but the raw drama unfolding was too compelling to interrupt. This was television gold, even if it was rapidly spiraling out of control. Colbert straightened in his chair, his mask of civility beginning to slip. "Mark, I think you're overreacting. These are legitimate questions about your past that—" "Legitimate?" Wahlberg's voice rose, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "You want to talk about legitimate? Let's talk about how you've spent years hiding behind comedy, while you destroy people's reputations. Let's talk about how you think your little jokes give you permission to say things that would get anyone else sued for defamation." The tension in the room was suffocating. Audience members were looking around nervously, unsure whether they should applaud, boo, or simply leave. This had gone far beyond the usual celebrity interview territory into something much more personal and vicious. "I stand by my journalism," Colbert said, his voice taking on a defensive edge that betrayed his growing irritation. "If you can't handle tough questions about your past, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye." That was the wrong thing to say, and everyone in the theater knew it the moment the words left Colbert's mouth. Wahlberg's face darkened, and when he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "Tough questions?" he repeated slowly. "Stephen, you wouldn't last 5 minutes in the neighborhoods I grew up in. You wouldn't survive one day of the life that made those incidents happen. You sit there in your expensive suit, in your comfortable little bubble, judging people who had to fight for everything they ever got." The silence that followed was deafening. Colbert's confidence was visibly cracking now, his usual quick wit seemingly abandoned in the face of Wahlberg's raw intensity. The host fumbled with his cards, clearly trying to regain control of the interview, but it was already too late. I think we should move on to talking about your film, Colbert stammered. But his attempt to redirect fell flat. Oh no, Wahlberg said, leaning forward in his chair like a predator closing in on wounded prey. We're just getting started, Stephen. You opened this door. Now let's walk through it together. The confrontation was about to reach a point of no return, and everyone in the Ed Sullivan Theater could feel it building like a storm ready to break. What happened next would shatter the illusion of late-night civility forever. Colbert, desperate to regain control, made the fatal mistake of doubling down on his attack, not realizing he was about to face the full force of Wahlberg's barely contained rage. Look, Mark, Colbert said, his voice dripping with condescension as he straightened his tie. I understand you're defensive about your past, but running from it won't make it disappear. The hate crimes, the violence, these aren't just youthful mistakes. They're patterns. Patterns? Wahlberg exploded, shooting to his feet so violently that his chair rolled backward. You want to talk about patterns, you sanctimonious piece of shit? Let's talk about your pattern of picking on people while you hide behind your writers and your fucking cameras. The audience gasped collectively, some covering their mouths in shock. Security personnel near the stage tensed, unsure whether to intervene. This had crossed every line of broadcast television decorum, and there was no going back. Colbert's face flushed red, his carefully crafted persona crumbling in real time. Sit down, Mark. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Wahlberg laughed bitterly, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. Stephen, you've built your entire career on embarrassing other people. You think your Harvard degree gives you the right to judge everyone else? You think because you can read off a teleprompter, you're some kind of moral authority? The host's hands were visibly shaking now as he gripped his desk. I'm trying to have a civilized conversation here. Civilized? Wahlberg's voice boomed through the theater. There's nothing civilized about what you just did. You ambushed me with questions about the worst moments of my life. Things I've spent decades trying to make amends for. You did it for ratings, you did it for clicks, and you did it because you thought I'd just sit there and take it like all your other guests. The camera captured every second of Colbert's visible distress. Sweat was beginning to form on his forehead, and his usual smugness had been replaced by something that looked dangerously close to fear. This wasn't going according to any script, and his panic was becoming evident to everyone watching. Mark, please, just sit down and we can what? Wahlberg stepped closer to the desk, his presence intimidating even through the television screen. We can pretend this is all fun and games? We can laugh it off so you can sleep better tonight knowing you got your cheap shots in? The silence in the theater was broken only by the nervous shuffling of audience members and the whir of cameras capturing every uncomfortable second. Some people in the front rows were already reaching for their phones, knowing they were witnessing something that would be replayed millions of times across social media. Colbert tried desperately to salvage the situation. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply trying to address questions that are already out there in the public. Stop lying! Wahlberg's fist slammed down on Colbert's desk with such force that water glasses jumped and papers scattered. Just stop fucking lying! You know exactly what you were doing! You and your producers sat in some meeting and decided to try to destroy me on live television. You thought it would be funny to watch me squirm. The host flinched at the impact, his composure completely shattered. For the first time in his career, Stephen Colbert looked small, vulnerable, and completely out of his depth. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. I don't think we should continue this interview. Oh, now you want to stop? Wahlberg's laugh was harsh and humorless. Now that you're the one who's uncomfortable, suddenly you want to end this? Where was that consideration when you were digging into my personal history? Where was that respect when you were trying to humiliate me in front of millions of people? The tension had reached a breaking point that even the most seasoned television professionals had never witnessed. Colbert looked around desperately, seeking help from his staff, but found only shocked faces staring back at him. His empire of snark and superiority was crumbling before his eyes. Security, Colbert called weakly, but his voice lacked any authority. The word came out more like a plea than a command. Security? Wahlberg's eyes blazed with fury. You're calling security on me? I haven't laid a finger on you, Stephen. I've just given you a taste of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of your bullshit for once. How does it feel? How does it feel to be the one who's exposed and uncomfortable? The host was now visibly trembling, his career-defining confidence nowhere to be found. I think we need to go to commercial. We're not going anywhere until we finish this conversation, Wahlberg declared, his voice carrying the authority that Colbert had completely lost. You started this fight, and now we're going to see it through to the end. The confrontation had reached its crescendo, with Colbert completely broken and Wahlberg standing triumphant over the wreckage of what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview. But the most explosive moment was yet to come. What unfolded next would become the most shocking moment in late-night television history. A final verbal assault that would end Stephen Colbert's reign of smugness once and for all. Wahlberg, sensing his opponent's complete defeat, decided to deliver the killing blow that would expose everything the host had tried so desperately to hide. You know what your real problem is, Stephen, Wahlberg said, his voice now eerily calm as he leaned across the desk, bringing himself face to face with the trembling host. You're a coward. You've spent your entire career attacking people from behind this desk because you know they can't really fight back. But when someone finally stands up to you, when someone finally calls you out for the bully you really are, you fall apart like a house of cards. Colbert's eyes darted frantically around the studio, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. His carefully constructed persona of intellectual superiority was in ruins, and everyone could see the frightened man beneath the facade. Please, Mark, let's just what? Pretend this didn't happen? Wahlberg's voice rose again, filling every corner of the theater. Let's pretend you didn't try to ambush me with questions about things I did when I was a troubled kid. Let's pretend you didn't think you could just destroy someone's reputation for your own entertainment. The host's breathing was becoming visibly labored. Sweat stains were forming under his arms, and his hands were shaking so badly he had to clasp them together to hide it. I was just doing my job. Your job? Wahlberg slammed his hand down again, causing Colbert to jump back in his chair. Your job is to interview celebrities about their projects, not to play prosecutor and jury with their personal lives. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? You saw an opportunity to take down Mark Wahlberg, and you thought you were clever enough to pull it off. The audience was transfixed by the complete role reversal happening before their eyes. The man who usually controlled every conversation was now cowering, while his guest dominated the stage with raw, unfiltered fury. Some people were recording on their phones, knowing they were witnessing television history in the making. I want you to look at me, Stephen, Wahlberg commanded, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Look me in the eyes and tell me you're proud of what you just tried to do. Tell me you're proud of trying to humiliate someone on national television for things they did as a teenager and have spent their entire adult life trying to make up for. Colbert couldn't meet his gaze. His eyes remained fixed on his desk, his whole body language screaming defeat and shame. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the nervous coughing from the audience and the mechanical hum of the cameras capturing every second of his humiliation. You can't do it, can you? Wahlberg continued relentlessly. Because deep down, you know what you did was wrong. You know you crossed a line that should never be crossed. You turned someone's pain and mistakes into entertainment, and now you can't even look them in the eye to defend it. When Colbert finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. What was that? Wahlberg cupped his ear theatrically. I don't think the audience heard you. I said I'm sorry, Colbert repeated, slightly louder but still broken. Sorry for what, specifically? Wahlberg wasn't letting him off easy. Sorry you got caught? Sorry your little ambush didn't work? Or sorry you tried to destroy someone for ratings? The host's shoulders sagged in complete defeat. I'm sorry for bringing up your past in that way. You're right, it was wrong. The admission hung in the air like a funeral shroud over Colbert's career. The man who had built his reputation on never backing down, never apologizing, never showing weakness, had just been completely broken on his own show by a guest who refused to play his games. Wahlberg straightened up, his point made and his victory complete. You know what, Stephen? I came here tonight to talk about my new film, to connect with fans, to have some fun. Instead, you decided to try to make me the villain of your little show. But the only villain here is you. He began walking toward the edge of the stage, his movements deliberate and final. The cameras followed him, capturing every step of what everyone knew was an unprecedented exit. No guest had ever walked off The Late Show like this. Certainly not after completely destroying the host's credibility in the process. "Wait, please don't go," Colbert called out weakly, perhaps realizing the magnitude of the disaster he had created. "We can start over." Wahlberg stopped and turned back one final time, his face a mask of disgust and contempt. "Start over? Stephen, there is no coming back from this. You showed everyone who you really are tonight. You revealed yourself to be exactly what I said you were. A coward and a bully who can't handle it when someone fights back." The actor looked directly into the main camera, addressing the audience at home, rather than the broken man behind the desk. "To everyone watching, this is what happens when people in power think they're untouchable. This is what happens when someone finally stands up to the bullies who have been getting away with this crap for years." He turned back to Colbert one last time. "And Stephen, next time you want to play these games with someone, make sure you're prepared for the consequences. Because not everyone is going to just sit there and take your shit." With those final words, Mark Wahlberg walked off the Late Show stage, leaving behind a completely shattered Stephen Colbert and an audience that had just witnessed the most explosive confrontation in late-night television history. The host sat motionless in his chair, staring at the empty guest seat, his career and reputation in ruins around him. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Colbert's defeat, as the theater fell into stunned silence. The king of late-night smugness had been dethroned by a guest who refused to be his victim, and nothing would ever be the same again.